Hi, welcome to our series brought to you by Dyanimite Lifestyle Real Estate, where we profile and give you a sneak peek into the lives of Americans and Canadians who live in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico. We're here today with my friend and neighbor, our very special feature foreigner of the month, Jennifer Nielsen, who has lived in Mexico for 10 years now. And is originally from Colorado, from Denver. So Jennifer, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? How did you even wind up here and what do you do here?
Yeah, no, thanks so much for having me today. It's great to always chat with you. And tell you a little bit more. I always like to say that I ran away to Mexico 10 years ago. Because I kind of did. I had a life, I was married, and I was unhappy and kind of wanting a new direction for my life, and had a dream of living in Mexico and studying here to get my master's degree in translation and interpretation. And so one day I just decided that I was going to run away to Mexico.
So what triggered that? What was your kind of revelation that gave you that final push to actually come here?
Yeah, it was obviously a really, really hard decision because I had really, a nice life. In the United States, it wasn't anything, like, oh my gosh, it was totally bad. But I was realizing that my life was going by, and I had this dream that it just kept kind of nagging at me. And I had done some summer study programs in Mexico, and then I traveled in Mexico, and I had gone to Mexico for the first time in 2001. And Mexico had stolen my heart, and it was just like it kept calling me and calling me until finally I was like, all right, like, life is going by, and there's just no reason that you shouldn't go ahead and go. Like, in 20 years, are you going to regret this decision? Is really what ultimately I was like, okay, in 20 years, are you going to regret this?
Yeah, wow, that's amazing. It's really, inspirational. I think it helps for people to hear it because it's true. You'll just have it in your mind, I'm gonna go, and then, you just, it's hard to pull the trigger, and it's,
It is. I mean, because there's so many reasons that you can say, like, I can't because I have this relationship, or my kids, or my house, or all my things, like you've mentioned too, and I saw you wrote about that, like, you have all of these things and all of this life, and yeah, and it's really easy to say all of these reasons why you can't.
Yeah, it's so true.
Yeah.
So you came here, and with this dream, and you wound up, meeting your husband, and now you have 3 kids.
Yeah.
Can you, tell us a little bit more about your family and raising a family in Mexico?
So I actually met my husband in Guadalajara. I had lived in Guadalajara for 6 years. I lived in Guadalajara. That's where I studied my master's program, and I lived there and met him there. And our twins, who are now 8, were born there. They were born in Guadalajara, and so we're now just have a baby who was born here in April in the Bahia area.
And she's very cute. Congratulations.
Thank you so much. So there's the us now. And raising a family in Mexico is definitely not without its challenges. Definitely.
Yeah, I can imagine. So what are some of the challenges?
Yeah, so I think obviously everything has, drawbacks and, things that are easier, right? And you've mentioned a lot of those too in your content. But one of the things that I think your kids are a little smaller than mine. So my boys are 8, and they're in 3rd grade right now of elementary school, which is how they do it here, which be the same in the US too. But I have a really hard time finding a decent academic level school. Obviously, the pandemic threw a wrench into everybody's kind of academic plans. So in addition to that, like, I personally feel like in the Vallarta area, it's really hard to find a quality school that is up to the expectations that I have as kind of an educator.
Yeah, I get it. Teachers are the hardest to please when it comes to education, but you know what you want, right?
Well, you have certain expectations
Yeah.
of what, like a logical kind of learning process is, and a pedagogy that is, I think apt for their age. And I feel like their whole, just the educational system to me it's not the same.
Yeah.
Of course it's not the same because it's a different country, but that's the thing that's hardest for me to adapt to and accept, and kind of not feel like I should take them to the United States so they can get a decent education.
Right, I get it. I totally get it. I mean, it's a huge priority and something that's really important to families.
Yeah.
So what is a plus about the education that, that they have in Vallarta? Are there any benefits to it, you think?
Yeah, definitely. So I feel like to me, the biggest thing that we didn't have in the States, because they went for a few years to school in the United States to preschool. I feel like in general, like the best positive thing here to me, and you have shared this with us as well, is that there's always really a lot of social activities for kids. They have always birthday parties, and like everybody's always invited to kind of like these more social and sporting events and stuff like that, which I feel in the US, to me, I didn't have as much access to kind of more the social stuff for them. I feel like that's really a positive thing, is that they get to have a lot of friends and do fun stuff with their friends.
I would really agree, like the kind of social emotional aspect of the learning process is a huge benefit for being here.
Yeah.
And so what is, a big pro, what's your favorite thing, I guess, about living in Mexico overall?
Just that I feel like I'm allowed to focus more on my quality of life. I feel like the quality of life is just not comparable here. The quality of life is just, to me, so much better. There's not a focus on just always output and work and things that you have to be doing and having. And like, I feel, to me, when I have gone back to the United States, it's just so much pressure. Yeah. Honestly, it's so much pressure. And here I feel like I'm more kind of just allowed to exist and
to be a human being.
Yeah, and just balance my life and spending time with family, and just kind of having those priorities over output and work.
Yeah, that makes sense. So speaking of work, how I think this is something that a lot of people wonder about, at home, is how do you even pull it off? Because one of the things is, your career or your job, or how that kind of transforms when you make that decision to move to Mexico. And obviously, being an interpreter of Spanish, is it really relates well to the theme of being in Mexico. And that was a decision that you kind of made before even coming here, right? It kind of went, it coincided with this transition of life for you. And I'm just kind of curious, what do you do? How do you make your business work? And are you doing it because you want to be in Mexico, or is it something that just kind of connected for you and just unfolded and organically in a way?
Yeah. So obviously, like you said, I had the dream of being a translator and interpreter for a long time. And the first thing that I realized after getting a BA in Spanish and having studied Spanish, but never living in a Spanish-speaking country, is I realized really quickly that I needed better language skills to be a translator and interpreter. And so that was one of the biggest reasons that I came down, because I knew that I needed to study here and live here and be here to actually have that level of language skills. And so that's kind of where I started. And obviously at the same time that I started studying my master's degree, I started my business. So I feel like it did, like I said, kind of unfold kind of naturally, but I do also feel at the same time it was really helpful in building my business being here. I think it was I don't know if it's to me more of like a mindset thing, but I felt like it was a little bit easier here again, like going back to not so much pressure from the very get-go of like, you know, I have to earn like a lot of money to be able to make this work. So I kind of had, you know, I was able to start, I had roommates, you know, I was paying very little in rent, like alone, like super low overhead.
Yeah. I think it's a big thing, you know, and I've noticed this, and prior to Mexico, you know, I was living in Central America, and, you know, a lot of my friends and people that I met along the way, both here and in Mexico, are entrepreneurs. You know, we all kind of run our own businesses, and that's something that is oftentimes feels a little bit prohibitive in the States. Like you need this, you know, huge sum of money, and you have, you know, and even just, you're floating yourself through the beginning of a business without a large income can be rather intimidating in a high cost country, right? And then when you're somewhere where it's a little bit more, you know, manageable, you can actually see that as a possibility, right? And then, you know, just not without its risks, right?
Right.
But you know, it's cool that you're able to, you know, actually do that. Tell us about your business.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm a translator and interpreter. I do legal documents, Spanish, English legal documents, for the most part, and interpretation. So like real time interpreting, either remotely or in person. Here in Mexico, I work with a lot of condos and stuff to do their meetings, condos and the HOAs to do meetings, other types of documents that people might need in real estate transactions, visas, paperwork, citizenship requirements. And so I'm also officially certified in the US and in Mexico. Here in Nayarit, I have the official translator in certification stamp that they require.
Wow.
So yeah, so that's the biggest chunk of my work in a small nutshell.
And what did you know, study? Was it a direct path to translation, or, you know, or is it something you kind of developed over time?
Ever since I was little, I've been really, really interested in Spanish and kind of the culture and language and people. It's been something that I was always very interested in. Growing up in Colorado, there are a lot of Spanish speaking people, and it was always something like I wanted to talk to them. And so that was just something that I studied and kind of came naturally to me. And then I went to college and I was like, oh, maybe I'll be an environmental studies major and I was going to save the world. And I quickly realized that, you know, that wasn't going to work for me. I was terrible at math. And then when kind of like the 4 years passed, it's like, oh, I have enough credits to graduate with a Spanish and an English minor. And so I got a Spanish degree, and I was like, what are you going to do with that? I'm like, oh, well, I'm going to be an interpreter, right? A court interpreter. Because that was one of the only things that I saw, like, nobody was like, that translation and interpreting was a thing that you could like make a living out of, which is obviously been a profession for, you know, a very long time. But kids that, you know, when I was a kid, it wasn't like a career path that anybody really told you about.
It's not like everybody's like, I'm going to be a doctor, I'm going to be a fireman, I'm going to be an interpreter. Nobody said that.
That wasn't really a thing. So so then after getting my BA, and then I was a Spanish teacher, so I did a whole lot of other lives in that interim, which Spanish was always involved in that because it's obviously always an asset to be bilingual. And then I came to study, I knew at that point, like I want to be a translator and interpreter, and I came to study a master's in translating and interpreting in Spanish and English at Guadalajara.
Yeah, wow. That's a really kind of cool path, and it seems like you've been really successful, which is, you know, is great, obviously. You know, and there's the need is definitely here. And I think that's one thing that, you know, a lot of people say about living in Puerto Vallarta is there's so much opportunity because there is a lot of need. And as the, you know, economy evolves and businesses, you know, pop up, and, you know, of course, real estate and developments are, you know, really kind of happening activity right now, as well as tourism. So there's just within those areas, there's so much opportunity and places to kind of get involved and recognize the need, and which is what you've done.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Trained people.
Yeah.
A lot of people here also realize that, and there's a saying that we use a lot in the language industry, is that, having 10 fingers doesn't make me a piano player more than being bilingual makes me a translator or an interpreter.
Right.
It's a whole other set, because obviously there are so many people here that are bilingual, which is amazing.
Yeah.
It's amazing, but it also doesn't make you able to understand the complex legalese of a purchase sale contract or a deed document at a notary's office, which I feel sometimes people kind of underestimate how complicated that is, and the value of somebody who is trained.
Yeah, I agree. You can't really wing it, and there's a lot at stake sometimes. You know what I mean? Imagine you're translating like an operation or something, and you say the wrong thing. You know what I mean? Like it's just, I know it's
Right.
there's different levels of
Right.
the intensity of it.
Right.
It is a real responsibility.
I mean, Google Translate works fine for a lot of stuff, right? If you're going around town, going to the grocery store, there are a lot of interactions where, and it's obviously getting better and better, and it works. It does help. But I feel like sometimes it works just enough to get you into trouble, or people who are really proficiently bilingual. I feel like sometimes are some of my best clients, actually, because they actually understand the point where it can actually get them into more trouble thinking that they fully understand, as opposed to those real misunderstandings. You're like, oh yeah, I totally get it, and then what you were expecting to happen doesn't happen.
Yeah, you don't realize until later. You're like, oh, that wasn't effective at all. So what is the name of your business, in case anybody that is watching this is interested in in these translation services, that is really considering moving to Mexico? And especially, I think even one of the first things that is necessary is your legal documents and all those things when you want to get your residency, which we'll cover at some point. But just in general, I know it's really helpful for people to have that contact and information of a professional interpreter who can help them fulfill those needs, especially relocation internationally and everything like that. So
yeah, it's Xolo translation, so it's XOLO. It's actually a really cool dog. It's called the Xolo Squinkles. Another story about XOLO translations.
That's easy. 4 letters. Not XOXO, XOLO.
Or OXXO. Not OXXO.
Oh yeah. Now we're just confusing people. So I was curious, and this is a question that I think about sometimes, and I just wonder what other people think about. After I've been abroad for 14 years at this point, a little bit more, and so everybody kind of has those things. There's some things you just like really miss, and then there's some things that you just are so glad that you miss the least. So I'm kind of curious, what is the thing you miss the most about back home,
Right.
and what's the thing you miss the very least?
Right. Well, I miss the most, and I think some people might think this is silly, but I kind of miss the U.S. Postal Service. Like, honestly, I know it's gotten worse over the past few years, but it's still a really efficient way to I miss sending stuff and getting cards, and I kind of miss the U.S. Postal Service.
I used to get so much mail, and it's I feel like I might have taken it for granted, and it's there's a lot of junk mail. Don't get me wrong, but when are you ever going to get a card from anyone?
Cards, yeah, that's kind of the thing that I miss the most. I was thinking about it.
That's a good one. Yeah. And what about the least? What do you not miss at all?
The rat race. I do not miss the rat race.
Oh,
and keeping up with the Joneses. I'm really happy to be out of that whole mindset and the politics on TV and oh god.
It's like all stress, you just kind of feel it. I've actually watched people that come to Mexico, and I've seen the stress physically leave their body. You know what I mean? It's just you just really get much. And it's hard enough having kids. You're already crazy busy, so just to have to incorporate the rat race into that, yeah. You know, and I think it's inspiring to know, you know, you can have a successful career and still be career oriented and successful, without necessarily, you know, engaging to that level and you know.
Yeah, I like to feel that that's a big advantage.
Yeah, I think so too. Quality of life. Yeah. Well, I think that's pretty much, you know, covers it for our interview for the day. And it was just like so great to have this, you know, detailed conversation with you about all of this stuff and just to get some more perspective of, you know, Americans living in Mexico and what that experience is like, because, you know, it's different for everybody, right?
Very much so.
Yeah.
Yeah, everybody, but I think everybody has a really unique and interesting story. All the people who I know here.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's,
Really
you know,
forward to your next entries.
thank you. Yeah, that's the plan. So, you know, you know, feature a bunch of people's different stories and learn a little bit more, you know, dig a little bit deeper, because a lot of times, you know, you're just kind of you know, seeing people in passing, and you know, you don't always get the opportunity to hear, you know, their stories. So yeah, I'm excited about the series. And you know, thank you for being our very first guest.